Hey, this is Dave DeCamp from antiwar.com. This is anti-war news for Friday, November 22nd, 2024. All right, the first story at the top of antiwar.com today. Russia hits Ukraine with new hypersonic missile. So Russian President Vladimir Putin said Thursday that Russia fired a new hypersonic ballistic missile at a Ukrainian military factory in Dnipro in response to U.S. and British long-range missiles being fired into Russian territory. He said, quote, "There was, among other things, a combat conditions test of one of Russia's newest intermediate-range missile systems. In this case, it was a ballistic missile in a non-nuclear hypersonic version," end quote. So the missile, code-named Airstrikes, would have been banned under the Intermediate Range Nuclear Forces Treaty, the INF, which the U.S. withdrew from under the Trump administration. Putin said, quote, "We believe the United States made a mistake by unilaterally destroying the Intermediate Range Nuclear Forces Treaty in 2019, end quote. So Ukrainian officials initially claimed that Russia fired an intercontinental ballistic missile, an ICBM, into Dnipro, but that was quickly contradicted by U.S. and other Western officials. The Pentagon said later in the day that the new missile was based on Russia's Rubesh ICBM model. So they're saying this new ballistic missile is based on a ICBM. It's an intermediate range ballistic missile based on an ICBM. That's what the Pentagon is saying, at least. And the Pentagon also said that Russia notified the U.S. before the launch, and the Kremlin confirmed that. So at least there's some sort of communication happening. So this happens, of course, after Ukraine launched the ATACMS. The U.S. provided missiles into Russia, and they also fired the British Storm Shadow missiles into Russia. That's something Putin also confirmed. And Putin said that the ATACMS did not result in any serious damage, but the Storm Shadow attack hit a military command point, resulting in deaths and injuries. He warned the NATO-supported strikes were turning the Ukraine war into a global conflict, and he said Russia has the right to attack the countries, to strike the countries supplying the missiles. He said, quote, "We consider ourselves entitled to use our weapons against the military facilities of those countries that allow their weapons to be used against our facilities. If anyone else doubts this, then they are wrong. There will always be a response," end quote. So there's Putin saying that he believes Russia has the right to strike U.S. and British military facilities. So this is another warning, using this new missile. I think, I don't see the U.S. backing down right now. I mean, they just seem hell-bent on escalation, but we're just in a very, very dangerous time. And this next story here is also very concerning. Russia says a U.S. missile defense base in Poland is a potential target. So Russian Foreign Ministry spokeswoman Maria Zakharova said Thursday that a controversial U.S. missile defense base in Poland is a potential target of the Russian military, comments that come amid soaring tensions as the U.S. just authorized these strikes, long-range strikes in Russian territory. So Zakharova said, quote, "Given the level of threats posed by such Western military facilities, the missile defense base in Poland has long been included among the priority targets for potential neutralization. If necessary, this can be achieved using a wide range of advanced weaponry," end quote. So again, I mean, here you have Zakharova. I mean, she's not particularly, from, seeing her comments at her press briefings, her comments to the press over the past few years, she's not one to normally just throw things out like this, that, oh yeah, this U.S. base, we might be able to target it and we could destroy it, is essentially what she's saying here. I mean, it just goes to show how serious Russia is about these escalations. And so this is the Aegis Ashore anti-ballistic missile system in Poland. And this has long been a security concern for Russia. It uses, so it's an anti-ballistic missile system, so it's made for missile defense, but it uses Mark 41 launchers, which are capable of fitting Tomahawk missiles, which they are nuclear capable, the Tomahawks. They have a range of about 1,000 miles. So a land-based version of the Tomahawk was previously banned by the INF, the treaty we just talked about in the last story. So when the U.S. started building this system, Russia, it raised some red flags. They were concerned that it was a potential violation of the INF. The U.S. also said one of Russia's missiles was a potential violation of the INF, but instead of negotiating anything, the U.S. just pulled out in 2019. So this has been a big concern of Russia for a long time. And so this base, they just activated it just recently. Kyle Anzelin wrote a story on that I covered recently. And then on Thursday, NATO, there was a ceremony formalizing NATO's control of the base. And so Zakharova, as I understand it, was asked about that in this press conference. And then she says, well, this is something it's a potential target of the Russian military. And she said that the establishment of the base follows, quote, a series of deeply destabilizing actions by the Americans and their North Atlantic allies in the strategic sphere, end quote. She said it follows a pattern of NATO's advancing military infrastructure closer to Russia's borders. And then I just mentioned, again, just the kind of the state of things. Tensions are very high, and Putin has made clear that he believes Russia has the right to hit U.S. military facilities. So if these Storm Shadow, if these ATACMS strikes keep coming, we're just going to see more escalations. All right, so the next one here, the big story from Thursday, ICC issues arrest warrants for Netanyahu and Gallant. So months after saying that they were seeking arrest warrants for these Israeli officials, the ICC, the International Criminal Court, on Thursday formally issued arrest warrants for Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu and former Israeli Defense Minister Yoav Gallant for their role in the genocidal war on Gaza. The ICC said it was issuing the arrest warrants for crimes against humanity and war crimes committed by Israel since October 8th, 2023, and up to at least May 20th, 2024. The court said that it found reasonable grounds to believe that Netanyahu and Gallant, quote, each bear criminal responsibility for the following crimes as co-perpetrators for committing the acts jointly with others: the war crime of starvation as a method of warfare and the crimes against humanity of murder, persecution, and other inhumane acts, end quote. The ICC said that the two Israeli leaders also, quote, bear criminal responsibility as civilian superiors for the war crime of intentionally directing an attack against the civilian population. They intentionally and knowingly deprived the civilian population in Gaza of objects indispensable to their survival, including food, water, and medicine and medical supplies, as well as fuel and electricity, end quote. So the ICC also announced that it was issuing an arrest warrant for Mohammed Diab Ibrahim al-Masri, known as Mohammed Daif. So Israel claimed that they killed Daif in a strike on a tent camp that killed nearly 90 Palestinians earlier this year, but Hamas has said he's still alive. And Daif is the head of Hamas's military wing, known as the Al-Qassams Brigades. So the ICC initially sought warrants for Hamas leaders Yahya Sinwar and Ismail Haniyeh, but they've both been killed by Israel, so they just issued the one for Daif. The court said that it was seeking a warrant for Daif for, quote, alleged crimes against humanity and war crimes committed on the territory of the State of Israel and the State of Palestine from at least October 7th, 2023, end quote. So the charges against Daif are related to the conduct of Hamas fighters in Israel during the October 7th attack, the taking of hostages, and the treatment of those hostages in Gaza. Notably, the court does not allege any sexual violence occurred during the October 7th attack, despite all these claims of mass rape from U.S. and Israeli media. They don't even make that allegation in the arrest warrant. The court does say that there's evidence of sexual violence and rape being committed against Israeli hostages in Gaza. But again, they're not saying there's any evidence of that happening in southern Israel on October 7th. The ICC said that it found reasonable grounds to believe that Daif is responsible for, quote, the crimes against humanity of murder, extermination, torture, and rape and other form of sexual violence, as well as the war crimes of murder, cruel treatment, torture, taking hostages, outrages upon personal dignity, and rape and other forms of sexual violence, end quote. So the warrants mean that Netanyahu, Gallant, and Daif could be subject to arrest in the more than 120 countries that are a party to the ICC. While the ICC went after both Israeli and Hamas leadership, Netanyahu, of course, cried anti-Semitism. He said it was an anti-Semitic decision. The U.S. also rejected the warrants, of course, because this implicates U.S. officials due to all the support and military aid that the U.S. has provided to Israel to help it carry out war crimes and crimes against humanity. A spokesperson for the White House National Security Council said, quote, "The United States fundamentally rejects the court's decision to issue arrest warrants for senior Israeli officials. We remain deeply concerned by the prosecutor's rush to seek arrest warrants and the troubling process errors that led to his decision," end quote. The U.S. has been putting significant pressure on the court to abandon the warrants against Israeli officials, but the campaign did not work. Congress may now advance bills to sanction the ICC. Senator Tom Cotton, very hawkish Republican senator, about as hawkish as you can get, he reminded the ICC that the U.S. has a law on the books that authorizes the use of force against the Hague-based court to free any U.S. or allied government officials or service members, nicknamed the Hague Invasion Act. And this was became law during the George W. Bush years. Cotton said, quote, "The ICC is a kangaroo court and Karim Khan is a deranged fanatic." He's referring to the prosecutor there. "Woe to him and anyone who tries to enforce these outlaw warrants. Let me give them all a friendly reminder. The American law on the ICC is known as the Hague Invasion Act for a reason. Think about it," end quote. So he's threatening the ICC with a military attack. And then later in the day, President Biden released a statement condemning the decision, condemning the warrants. He said, quote, the ICC issuance of arrest warrants against Israeli leaders is outrageous. Let me be clear once again. Whatever the ICC might imply, there is no equivalence, none between Israel and Hamas. We will always stand with Israel against threats to its security," end quote. And again, of course, this implicates Biden. So does the ICJ genocide case. And this really shows the hypocrisy. I mean, I saw people sharing on Twitter. Lindsey Graham, came out against the ICC, but he said all this stuff supporting them against Russia. Same thing with Biden. Blinken, the Biden administration backed the court against Russia, and then now they're going after it because they're going after their ally, and they're essentially also going after the U.S. in a way. Not that they actually issued any warrants for U.S. officials, but a lot of people are calling for that now. Where's the warrants for Biden and Blinken and all these people that facilitated and enabled what's happening in Gaza? All right, so the next one here: Israeli attacks in Gaza kill at least 71 Palestinians in 24 hours. Gaza's health ministry said on Thursday that Israeli attacks killed at least 71 Palestinians and wounded 176 in the previous 24-hour period as Israeli strikes continue to pound targets across the Strip. Al Jazeera reported that Israeli strikes in northern Gaza early Thursday killed 88 people. I mentioned this yesterday, but the health ministry only counts. So the health ministry said 71 in 24 hours. The reports were 88 just Thursday morning. But the problem is that the health ministry only counts bodies that are brought to hospitals and morgues. The strikes in North Gaza targeted Beit Lahia, these areas that have been under complete siege, where they say there's no civil defense crews, no rescuers, so they can't recover all the bodies. The ministry said, quote, "A number of victims are still under the rubble and on the roads, and ambulance and civil defense crews cannot reach them." So this picture here, just a warning, this man's carrying a dead Palestinian child. There's just been so many of these pictures lately, and today was a particularly bad day. Again, looking through the Reuters and all the news agencies' pictures from the day in Gaza, you see dead kids, wounded, injured. Just an absolute nightmare. I just mentioned a reporter for Al Jazeera who's on the ground in Gaza said that there's no paramedics or civil defense crews left in Beit Lahia, so they're not able to recover the bodies. And Israeli strikes were also reported in southern and central areas of Gaza. In Rafah, at least 3 Palestinians were killed, and in Khan Yunis, at least 3 were killed. And this picture is from central Gaza. So there's also strikes in central Gaza that killed children. All right, so the next one here, Israeli airstrikes kill 47 in Lebanon's Baalbek. So this article is from Jason Ditz. So very heavy airstrikes in Baalbek in Lebanon. The governor reported at least 47 were killed, and these were just in strikes on Thursday. 47 were killed and 22 were wounded in the Baalbek Hermel province. The governor noted rescue workers were still out searching several areas, so the figures are certain to rise. While such high tolls in a single region usually comes after one high casualty attack, that doesn't appear to be the case. There was a series of smaller attacks on towns and villages in the area. One town of Makne, immediately north of Baalbek, saw 6 people killed. Just to the west, there was another town where an attack on a house killed 4 members of a single family. The city of Baalbek is under an evacuation order by Israel, as is much of the surrounding area. The eastern Bekaa Valley, including Baalbek, are seen as Hezbollah hotspots in Lebanon, as they have a substantial presence there. But of course, we have seen so many strikes on just killing civilians on residential buildings. And over 1 million people have been displaced across Lebanon, with a large number of those fleeing this province. Baalbek isn't empty, however, as many residents are too poor to leave, or, many of the places that they take shelter in also end up getting bombed. I mean, there's been all these stories about entire families being wiped out that evacuated from the evacuation zone. So just really heavy airstrikes continue. Still this talk of a ceasefire, but, it just doesn't seem likely, with Israel saying that they need freedom to act in South Lebanon. All right, so the next one here, the UN envoy says that Israel's attack on Syria's Palmyra may be the deadliest yet. This is another one from Jason. So this is about the attack on Syria that Israel launched on Wednesday. The initial death toll was 36, making it one of the deadliest strikes in years, but the toll has continued to soar. The latest figures is that 82 people were killed. And this is from the Syrian Observatory for Human Rights, which their numbers, can be a little shaky at times, but it's pretty clear that a lot of people were killed in this strike. They're saying that 53 Syrians were among the slain, along with dozens of foreign nationals. They said that the slain were linked to Iraq's al-Nujaba movement, a Shiite paramilitary group. So the UN Deputy Special Envoy to Syria, Najat Roshdi, told the UN Security Council that this is likely the deadliest single Israeli attack on Syria in history. There was an attack in January 2021 where Israel attacked military positions along the Syria-Iraq border, killing 57 people. So again, this is just, they've really ramped up the attacks on Syria. All right, so the next one here, the House passes a bill targeting pro-Palestine nonprofits. On Thursday, the House passed a bill that would give the Treasury Department the power to revoke the tax-exempt status of any nonprofit it deems to be a terrorist-supporting organization. And this legislation is designed to target pro-Palestine and anti-war groups and charities. According to Middle East Eye, a coalition of more than 300 civil liberties groups had sent a letter to lawmakers urging them to vote against the bill. The letter said that the legislation would, quote, grant the executive branch extraordinary power to investigate, harass, and effectively dismantle any nonprofit organization, including news outlets, universities, and civil liberties organizations like ours, end quote. And antiwar.com is a nonprofit. A coalition of 55 centrist and progressive Jewish organizations also came out strongly against the bill, saying, quote, no individual, including a Treasury Secretary, should be given nearly unfettered power to remove an organization's tax-exempt status, end quote. Other Jewish organizations, including the Anti-Defamation League and pro-Israel lobby groups such as AIPAC, support the bill. So this bill, which is called the Stop Terror Financing and Tax Penalties on American Hostages Act, would also provide tax-exempt status and relief for American hostages being held in other countries. It passed through the House in a vote of 219 to 184, with only 15 Democrats voting in favor of the bill and just one lone Republican voting against it. And of course, that is Representative Thomas Massey, who's the only Republican who votes against things like this. And again, this is clearly designed to target these pro-Palestine. I think it's specifically targeted at groups involved in the protests, but also, what's the smear? I mean, what do people, anybody in general who's anti-war, who opposes a U.S. war somewhere or a U.S. intervention somewhere, they're always smeared as pro the other side, pro-Putin, pro-Hamas in this case. So it is a smear that we get from people that you see Republicans in Congress always call any critic of support for Israel, pro-Hamas, pro-terrorist, say that they support terrorists, say that they're anti-Semitic. These are the things that they throw. So I think it's something that could be used to really crack down on criticism of U.S. support for Israel. And so it's unclear. So it passed through the House. It's unclear if it's going to make it through the Senate. But if it doesn't, if it fails, or say they don't even vote on it before the new Congress comes, this is going to be reintroduced in the new Congress, and the Republicans have the majority in the House and the Senate. And this is one of the things I think we have to worry about with the Republicans is this crackdown on speech critical of Israel. They want to call it anti-Semitism, but they're trying to conflate criticism of the state of Israel with anti-Semitism. And Trump has vowed to crack down on pro-Palestine protesters at college campuses. There was a clip going around recently, but this was from September while he was on the campaign trail speaking at some event. He said, quote, "Here is what I will do to defeat anti-Semitism and defend our Jewish citizens in America. My first week back in the Oval Office, my administration will inform every college president that if you do not end anti-Semitic propaganda, they will lose their accreditation and federal taxpayer support," end quote. So, of course, it's framed as anti-Semitic propaganda. But again, this is criticism of Israel that we're talking about with these college protests. And many of the protesters themselves are Jewish. And some of the groups that organize these protests are Jewish, including Jewish Voice for Peace. And they're smeared all the time, as pro-Hamas. The ADL has a whole thing about them on their website, accusing them of putting out messaging that's supportive of terrorists and things like that. So these are the groups that I think this is really designed to target. So these are things that I am worried about. Another thing that happened today, Matt Gaetz withdrew as the nominee for Attorney General. And I forget her name. Trump picked someone else, this lady who's Attorney General in Florida. I don't really know anything about her. One thing with Gaetz, because I knew he voted against that Anti-Semitism Awareness Act, I thought maybe he wouldn't go in on this, trying to crack down on this criticisms of Israel. But I don't know about this other person that Trump has now picked. All right, so I left up the one yesterday about the Senate vote. The next one here, Chinese defense minister rejects talks with the U.S. So on Thursday, the Chinese Defense Ministry blamed the U.S. for the lack of talks between the two countries' defense ministers while they were both in Laos for meetings with Southeast Asian officials. The U.S. said that it asked for Secretary of Defense Lloyd Austin to hold talks with his Chinese counterpart, Dong Jun, on the sidelines of the Association of Southeast Asian Nations Defense Ministers meeting, but China declined due to U.S. support for Taiwan. Chinese Defense Ministry spokesman Wu Qian said, quote, "The responsibility lies fully with the American side. The U.S. cannot undermine China's core interests on the Taiwan issue, yet at the same time try to conduct exchanges with the mainland Chinese military as if nothing had happened," end quote. Wu said that the U.S. must, quote, "immediately correct its mistakes, earnestly respect China's core interests, and strive to create favorable conditions for high-level exchanges between the two militaries," end quote. So this happened. So back in 2022, China suspended high-level military talks with the U.S. They would not speak with Lloyd Austin, the Secretary of Defense. That came after Nancy Pelosi's very provocative trip to Taiwan that provoked the largest ever Chinese military drills. Earlier this year, high-level military contacts resumed, but now it looks like they're suspended again. And this is goes to show, I cover it, this Taiwan stuff, these new arms sales to Taiwan, the new U.S. military aid for Taiwan, which is a big escalation, and China's warnings. China's always warning the U.S. When President Xi met with President Biden recently, he repeated the warnings about Taiwan. It's the first red line that must not be crossed. And I think by declining this meeting, China is showing that, we're not just saying this, we can't, essentially it can't be business as usual if you keep pushing us on Taiwan. So, and this is another thing with the incoming Trump administration. I don't really see any kind of change when it comes to China. It's a lot of China hawks are being put in the administration. Biden's administration is full of China hawks too. So it actually might not really be much different, but it's going to be more of the same, I think. All right, so that is it for the news for today. Please go check out our Viewpoints, one from Ted Snyder, Winds of Change Blow Through Ukraine, one from Doug Bandow, Biden Legacy, War with Russia, one from Darrell Lee, Congress to vote on the most dangerous domestic anti-terrorism bill since the Patriot Act. That's about that bill I just discussed, some more detail about it. One from Casey Carlisle, Don't Make Good People Do Bad Things. And one from James Banford, The Case Against Joe Biden for Complicity in Genocide. So please go check all of that out. Buy Scott Horton's book, Provoked. This thing here, this beautiful book. Go buy it if you haven't already. I saw on Twitter he posted a picture of him getting ready to start recording it, and he's going to release it as a podcast series instead of just, because it's going to take forever to record the whole book. Not forever, but you know what I mean. It'll take a while to record the whole book and release the audiobook. So this way he can release it in pieces. I think he's going to do it through Substack or something like that. That way people can start, that don't want to sit down and read the book can start listening to it, hopefully soon. But it'll be sooner than if he did the whole audiobook and released that in like a year or something. But anyway, support this show, like, subscribe, comment, tell your friends about antiwar.com. This is the last show for the week. Let's hope there's no nuclear escalation this weekend. I shouldn't laugh about that, but for the record, I don't see nuclear escalation happening, but I do think some big things could happen in these next few days, if these British and American missiles keep hitting Russia. Anyway, I will be back in a few days. Thanks for listening.